Kadarius Toney is one of the most interesting NFL players I have ever seen. If you didn't pay a lot of attention to sports media, you'd probably assume this was just another guy who had a ton of potential coming in, but could never really put it together in the league. Looking a bit deeper than just that, there's a story inside the name Kadarius Toney that includes football dominance, a successful rapping career, and a life off the field so amazing that it has sprouted accounts like Kadarius Toney Worshipper, posting everything and anything relating to Toney every single day. So who the hell is this guy? First, let's take things back to the wonderful year of 2016. Matt Ryan just took home the MVP, while the ghost of Peyton Manning and the Broncos just won the Super Bowl. The NFL was still yet to see Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs take over, but there was some kid over at Blount High School in 8 Mile, Alabama, stringing together a pretty strong case for becoming something just like that. If you've been a dedicated Kadarius Toney lover for the past several years, you probably already knew that it wasn't initially wide receiver in which Toney became such a beast on the field. It was none other than throwing dimes over at quarterback. He was basically the real-life emulation of Madden 04 Mike Vick in his junior year, a season that included throwing for over 3,500 passing yards to go along with his 53 total touchdowns. Yeah, this guy was a beast. And these stats included a healthy mix of the good old Kadarius we know and love today, making defenders look clueless on the ground, but he also had some bombs into the end zone in the mix. It wasn't a case of a running back who was so talented he could just waltz into the QB room with his athleticism either. Toney could legit play inside the pocket, extend plays, and do pretty much everything and anything you'd want out of a quarterback. His arm strength drew comparisons to the jug machines from quarterback trainers, but it was his zigzagging shiftiness that started to become so notorious, coaches and teammates had to come up with nicknames for the moves he was inventing out there. While the young Kadarius still had aspirations of playing quarterback, recruitment sites simply listed him as an athlete, a position given to many of the dual threat quarterbacks coming out of high school who were too athletic to be given a position. With a 3-star rating and the athlete title, Toney had high D1 offers begging for him at his doorstep, but it was none other than the Florida Gators and Jim McElwain who Kadarius decided to commit with, still stuck with that athlete label. Toney would have to wait until his 3rd season before seeing some consistent action on the field for Florida after the departure of head coach Jim McElwain and the subsequent replacement Dan Mullen being fascinated with the idea of Kadarius Toney just like us. But before he could even suit up for his 2019 season opener, there was a suspension to 7 Gators, including the King himself, with little info to given why. Now, the lore behind this is pretty crazy, so strap in your seatbelts, like, literally, okay, you'll get that soon, just let me tell the story. Out at the club, 6 of Kadarius' teammates were out that night, relaxing, chopping it up, and just having a good time like college kids do. It was your everyday night for a bunch of college guys out in Florida, up until an unnamed character who had apparently lost money betting on the team earlier in the year confronted them. He began threatening them, like death threats, really bad stuff, and it got so bad to the point where one of Kadarius' teammates had to call him himself, and Toney, who lived off campus, was completely unaware of this situation going down and what was happening to them. Without hesitation though, Kadarius got up and grabbed the only thing he knew could help, an airsoft gun he had painted to appear as an assault rifle, to go protect his boys. Using this to potentially help fend off these alarming threats his teammates were receiving, it worked. However, at this point, a very young Kadarius, who was basically apart from all his family living far from home, felt extreme paranoia. In part because of the gamblers supposedly looking for him around campus, and also he had just defended his teammates from an unknown gambler who he had no idea who had connections to in the city. Realizing the situation had gotten life-threatening, KT did what he felt like he had to defend his life, and so he went and purchased a real assault rifle, similar to the one he had previously painted. Luckily, the story ends shortly with no damage to anyone done, aside from the Gators roster in their season opener, as Kadarius would get pulled over for a seatbelt violation in which the police discovered the real gun he had just purchased. Now, back to football. And some great news, Kadarius was finally getting opportunities to show his supernatural talent. That sounds like an exaggeration, but just take a look at some of these 5-yard gains Toney was picking up. On paper, this is a seemingly minimal play in the game, but on tape, this stuff would be on the ESPN Top 10 daily. As impressive as these runs and catches could be, there was still just minimal gains and production. Toney realized that if he wanted to become more than just a gadget player in the college scene and even the NFL, he had to work and pick a position to stick to. This revelation turned into an off-season of hard work, and in just 2 months, Kadarius had become a true wide receiver who could get a clean release off the press and run those zigzagging routes with or without the ball, turning his versatility into a focused weapon for the Gators. This would show throughout all of his senior season with the Gators, including a farewell tour of 400 plus yards and 3 touchdowns in his final 3 games, leaving Florida with a legacy that included tons of ankle breakers, touchdown dances, seatbelt violations, and a rapping career. Yes, Kadarius was a full-fledged rapper at this point, stemming from a passion since grade 5 or 6, progressing to multiple produced and released mixtapes under the alias Yung Joka. Unfortunately, NFL scouts don't like music, I guess, because this was one of the many red flags surrounding Kadarius' name ahead of the 2021 NFL Draft. A passion for rapping may interfere with his ability to progress as an NFL receiver, which, looking back on that sentiment, is just a crazy thing to say about somebody who liked music, but there was a few other things they were saying that made a bit more sense. One of these was lack of experience at position, as Toney, opposed to the other various high-level receivers entering the draft, had begun playing wideout for just 1 year, whereas others had played throughout the entirety of their careers in football. But there was still one thing that Kadarius had that nobody else did in the draft, and that was his aura. I'm not joking either. You see, the 2021 NFL draft process occurred during the coronavirus, a time that absolutely nobody wants to remember. During this, specifically the New York Giants front office was feeling this full force ahead of their pre-draft interviews. Nobody wanted to be there. So when Kadarius walked in, or Yung Joka, whichever you prefer, the energy and charisma he brought to that room was enough to put the Giants on full tilt with their 16th pick in the first round. However, analysts and scouts alike expected Toney to fall somewhere in the mid to early second round, no earlier. The overall evaluation was he was a project, a player with tons of upside but little product aside from a senior season of playing wide receiver. But like I said earlier, the Giants saw something more than just this label, and Kadarius ended up going at the 16th selection in the first round of the 2021 NFL Draft. Probably the craziest pick of the entire first round at that point, making the NFL dream come true, signing a 4-year deal for $13 million. I mean, surely things get easier for KT here, right? Well, Toney was in and out of the lineup for the Giants for the first 3 weeks of his rookie year, dealing with a nagging hamstring injury following him from his time over in Florida, but this couldn't hold him back from being great for too long. In weeks 4 to 5, Kadarius broke out in the NFL, posting 78 yards and the very next game breaking Odell Beckham Jr.'s rookie reception record against the division rival Cowboys while not even playing the entire game. Yes, he had 189 yards, 10 receptions, and he threw some punches in the mix all in one game. This was pretty much the peak of Toney's rookie year, with the Giants being the Giants and the hamstring issues continuing to keep him in and out of the wide receiver rotation. Now, after an up and down, rocky rookie season and little noise surrounding Kadarius' name, panic began to break out in New York. These concerns all stemmed when a now second-year Kadarius failed to show up for voluntary training camps, and it only got worse after he reportedly didn't even come to the facility to get the playbook. In response to all this, Yung Joka dropped a new album with him appearing to be in front of the New York skyline, and if it wasn't already confirmed he loved the New York Giants, decided to get not one, but multiple tattoos, including a nice, juicy G logo on his back and arm. Things seemed to rejoice, but that wouldn't last long. After 7 weeks again struggling with that damn hamstring, Toney was traded. In response, Kadarius decided to take to Twitter, claiming that he was never actually injured, making this entire New York saga bizarre to say the least. But on the other end, Toney was still one of the most creative weapons you could find on the offensive end, and it was none other than the most creative offense and quarterback duo we've ever seen, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, who ended up picking him up. Playing alongside his favorite player Patrick Mahomes, Toney had some productive games, including his first touchdown in Week 9, but nothing compares to the absolute pinnacle of Toney's football career, which happened in none other than February 12th, 2023. Down by 1 near the start of the fourth quarter, the Chiefs desperately needed a spark versus the Philadelphia Eagles, who were picking up momentum quickly in that second half. Kadarius received the kick like usual, but what went down next was nothing close to ordinary. After cutting off the left side of the field, The Eagles thought surely this was a 25 to 20 yard return at most. But that's when Kadarius Toney comes in. Toney took this kick for 65 yards down the right side of the field, going all the way over on the other side, setting the Chiefs up for a walk-in touchdown. This was not only the spark the Chiefs needed to win the Super Bowl, but it also cemented Kadarius Toney in football history, with the longest punt return in Super Bowl history. This is the point of the story where we should see a true breakout, a climax and a conclusion filled with success for years to come. With Kansas City lacking a true wide receiver one after Tyreek Hill left, it felt like Kadarius finally had found his spot. All the way until he didn't. The season opener versus the Detroit Lions of 2023 was about the worst night you could possibly imagine to be a Kadarius Toney fan. This game was close, all the way up until a seemingly game-changing play where Toney appears to be wide open with pretty much nobody near him and he drops it. He also dropped a pick six in this game and another ball, but it happens. Toney lost them the game and Twitter did not let him forget that. With very real injuries continuing to haunt him and now the media full tilt against him, Kadarius struggled, to put it lightly. And that's okay. Under the Super Bowl expectations and constant beef with Giants fans, I think we all would too. And after a season that included a few more drops and a Super Bowl run that did not include KT, but it did have a video which of Kadarius Toney claimed to be the best receiver in the league when he got the ball. I personally chose not to comment on this video, but I love his attitude. And by the 2024 season, we finally received another mixtape from Yung Joka. Unfortunately, Toney would not stick with Mahomes and the Chiefs, being traded and not seeing the field much in this current season. But there's one thing that Kadarius never does, and that is give up. So personally, if I was an NFL DB, I would be counting my blessings that Kadarius is not in the league right now, because when he does, he will be on a revenge tour like we've never seen before. And if you could take one thing from this entire video of Kadarius Toney's legacy, it should be to worship Kadarius Toney every day.